Cops of Reddit, what situation did you respond to, only to find out it was the biggest waste of time ever? Was en route to a domestic argument between husband and wife called in by a neighbor. Screams, swearing, hitting, arrived to a dude in his boxers by himself watching Game of Thrones on his surround sound. Oh man. I called once because my upstairs neighbor was screaming and slamming the walls. Thought it was a domestic, but he had bought the new Call of Duty and doing terribly, so he was slamming his controller into the wall and ground. One day, I came home fairly late and noticed my car had been recently egged. I washed it off, but on a whim, I walked up the street and noticed that car had been egged too. I walk up and see two more. It's 2:30 am. What to do? Wake up the owners? I call the cops and tell them that I need to walk up the street with a flashlight and wash all the cars. And I'm not trying to break into them, but it looks like lots of cars have been egged, so I don't know how far I'll need to go. It's obvious the eggers are long gone. So if they get reports of a suspicious person, it's just me. I felt like an idiot. Cop showed up and paced me the whole time with his car just to make sure no one shot me or anything. I washed about a dozen cars. I guess they just ran out of eggs. Really awesome of you to do. No need to have felt like an idiot. Just a good neighbor. I responded to a sexual assault in progress in an alley. Caller said she heard grunting and what sounded like woman yelling for help. Dispatch alert toned the call and I went all out to get there as fast as possible. When I pulled into the alley, brakes were smoking and I was ready to kick some butt. I jumped out of the car and ran to the sounds, which was still intense and close by. I rounded the corner to find two raccoons straight up duking it out. I'm talking squared off, throwing punches, etc. It sounded terrible, but it was awesome to watch. Not a very long or crazy one, but today I responded to a woman locked out of her vehicle. Took me quite some time to get across town. Find her in the giant mall parking lot, etc. The woman is crying hysterically when I get there about how scared she is about never being able to drive her car again. I calm her down, take a look at the car, and open the passenger door. Just open it. She only locked the driver door on accident and didn't try any of the other doors to open the car. Sounds like a person with a panic disorder to me. Former cop. I was dispatched to a burglary in progress. A lady called and said she was locked inside her bedroom and people were rummaging through her living room of her apartment. She is hysterical and begging for us to rescue her. I mean, she is beyond frantic. So me and my partner are racing there as fast as possible. Lights and sirens hoping to get there before she is brutally murdered. We get there, surround the apartment, and I'm about to kick the door in. Then the door opens and the lady is standing there with the most embarrassed look on her face. Hair a mess, disheveled pajamas. She forgot that she decided it was hot and opened her balcony door, which created the desired breeze she wanted, and blew some papers off her coffee table. That was it. The wind. TLDR. Dispatched to burglary in progress. Lady is hysterical. Turns out the wind blew papers off a table. I had a very similar call once, but instead of the wind it turned out the guy had had a nightmare about people breaking into his house and woke up thinking it was real. Dealt with the same couple for about a year. They would call anytime they were mad at each other and then lay out their full exploits, but they were mundane. She takes pens from the bank. He speeds on Main Street. She had sex with 17-year-old when she was 18. No assault ever occurred. No abuse. Just two people who didn't know how to break up and wanted us to fix it for them. I'm a dispatcher, not a cop, but I once had to send an officer out to a lady's house because she had left town that morning and suddenly couldn't remember if she'd closed her refrigerator door before she left. The call came in at like 1 am and she wanted us to send someone out to look in her windows to see if the fridge was closed and possibly break in to close it if it was open, to which we said no fricking way. An officer was sent. The fridge was, in fact, closed. My fiance is a cop and told me a story about someone calling the police because they were locked out of their house. Upon arriving to this ridiculous call, who on earth calls 911 and not a locksmith? It turned out that they were not locked out of their house, but rather they were locked out of the bedroom. There was no child or pet or hazardous item that was locked in the bedroom. They calmly explained to this person that being locked out of your bedroom is not a police matter and advised that they call a locksmith. In San Francisco, I've been told the fire department will respond as long as they have nothing else to do and break into your house and unlock the door just for practice. Not a cop, but the cop did say, well, this was a waste of my time, so it's probably close enough. I used to work at a horse board barn, a couple big barns, a few pastures, and we had a 16-acre pasture across the street that we turned broodmares and retired horses out on. One day after lunch I walk out and there is a cop car sitting in the driveway. I sort of blink at it a bit and wonder if the cop is going to get out and come up to the gate or something. It was kinda surreal. Finally decide I should go out and ask if I could help him with something. The first thing he says to me is, I'm pretty sure this is a waste of my time. Turns out someone called in and said we had 2 skinny horses in a mud lot with no access to water, and they were pretty sure one was dead already. I just looked around at the, probably a bit too plump if I'm honest, happy horses wandering around the pastures, which were admittedly muddy because it rained, and shrugged. The cop just shook his head and told me to have a good day. Also, just a general SAR, horses will sleep laying down. If you see a horse laying down, don't be too concerned. Yes, they will look dead. Watch to see if they take a breath. Respiration's only about 10 breaths a minute. Some people think that if you can see any slight rib outline that the animal is starving to death. Source: greyhounds, also rather plump for the breed but still ribby. Used to be a cop. Answered a call from an old lady who claimed someone broke into her house and stole the insides of her cuckoo clock. My ex's grandma had gone through a phase of calling the cops frequently because she thought someone in the house. Eventually they figured out she was having hallucinations of sorts for having lived in a war zone in her youth. So every day before bed, my ex would have to search her house and declare it clear, otherwise she would have a panic attack. Cop here. Honestly 95% of calls. There are just too many to pick an example. The biggest reason is that people think our job is general problem solving. Having an argument with your roommate? Just call the police. They'll take your side so you can win the argument. Everyone knows that we automatically have to be on the side of the 911 caller. See a guy walking down the street? Well, since you've never seen him before, call the police just to check it out and make sure he's not a murderer. This is why I'm always amazed when I hear horrific stories where no one called the police. Well, I heard her screaming and gunfire, but I didn't want it to bother anyone. Like, trust me, the police want to hear about the actually criminal activity. Don't be shy. They get way dumber calls. Not an officer, but about 12 years ago, my teenage brother and mother were watching my 3-year-old daughter during the summer. They bought a small plastic pool for her to swim in. She loved it so much that she was squealing with delight in the backyard. The neighbors called the police saying someone was beating a child and she was screaming in my mother's backyard. Everyone got a huge laugh out of it when it was exposed that an infant was swimming for the first time. This is the kind of wholesome that I need more of in my life, lol. Glad that it got settled though. I don't know if it's boring enough to be a waste of time, but I was doing a ride along with an officer and we responded to a call that was reported as a drive-by. Ambulance hauled off the victim, shot in the leg, and 10 cruisers were canvassing the area for the supposed blood trail when the guy claimed to have limped to his apartment. Ladies and gents, play back that 911 call. A woman called, muffled out, "What do I tell them?" To which someone replied, saying he got shot by someone. This was overspoken by the dispatcher spiel, so it was missed by the dispatcher. Yep. 10 cars of wasted time for a guy that later admitted to messing around with a loaded gun and shooting himself. Caught falsifying a report and an impeding charge just for the heck of it due to 2 hours of wasted time, all trying to save his dignity. Oh boy, I'm not a cop anymore due to medical reasons, but it's hard answering this question with only one story. I'll try make this short. We went out to this house on a domestic because a woman and her husband were getting into it and arguing. They said they weren't physically fighting, but when I got there I thought differently because of the amount of crap thrown all over the place. The male half had some bleeding above his eye. So I'm talking to them and of course they're giving me conflicting stories like they always frickin' do. And the woman says something along the lines of, I just had it, I freaking snapped and threw the dang fan at his face. Now this is one of those big fans with maybe like a 4-foot pole as a stand, used usually for an entire room. Can't think of what they're called right now. She said that when they were arguing she went into the living room to get away from her husband, sit down, and cool off. But the dude comes over with the fan, positions it next to her face, turns it on, and proceeds to fart into the fan. So she flipped. I look at the dude and he's just kind of standing there, giving me that face of guilt like he's acknowledging the fact that I'm judging him, but he's too embarrassed to vocally admit he did in fact fart into the fan to pee off his wife. Firstly, they were both in the late 30s, and this was the reason why I'm at their place. Secondly, she just admitted to assaulting her husband, so unfortunately she's gotta go to jail. I wouldn't say that the call itself was a waste of time. It was a genuine domestic with an offense we could charge, but the circumstances that led up to it were freaking stupid. So next time it takes them forever to get to your house for your theft report or whatever, remember that people like them exist and keep us busy. Not a cop or a firefighter. However, my parents live across from an older lady who is the self-proclaimed neighborhood watch. She has called the non-emergency line for the local police station so many times that she is not allowed to call that line anymore. The only way she can get a hold of the police is to either call 911 in an extreme emergency or actually drive to the police station to make a complaint. This woman is a terror to their neighborhood. She reports to the cops the most useless crap. My favorite complaint that she has ever made was the time that 2 stray cats were doing it in her driveway. This woman took pictures and a video of the 2 cats doing their thing instead of going out there and trying to get rid of them herself. She printed out the pictures, put the video on a CD and brought it to the police station, and the next day, obviously the police couldn't do anything about it. The best part of this story is the one cop that she complained to put up the picture in the common room so everyone could have a good laugh at it. We know this part because my parents have become really good friends with the cops over the years of living across from her. Oh man, I live next door to a woman just like that. The local authorities all know her by name now and no one can take her seriously anymore. Still a cop. Generally the wealthier district is where the dumbest calls come from. I was once dispatched to a call in said district where a woman was locked inside of her car. The driver door wouldn't open. However, literally every other door would. She wasn't particularly out of shape. She just didn't put it together that she could crawl out the passenger side. At first I thought she was intoxicated, but after talking to her a bit I realized she just wasn't very bright. I feel like at that point someone shouldn't have a license. I was the dumb caller. I was home alone in my dad's house when I smelled gas from my room. I went to the stove to find out it had been on, and I turned it off. Everything still smelled like gas, so I hid outside and googled house smells like gas, which of course turned up a result like there's a gas leak, call the cops now. I called the cops, and I actually forgot my address and they had to find me. When they did show up, they couldn't find any gas because I'd opened all the windows. I was feeling pretty embarrassed for wasting their time at this point, but then it got worse. I was a minor, and after calling I found out they couldn't legally let me go without an adult to take custody of me. That, or they could discharge me to a hospital. I tried calling my dad, but he wouldn't pick up the phone. My sibling who lives with me wouldn't either. The only person who answered was my sibling who lived 30 minutes away. So an ambulance and a cop car had to wait with me for 30 minutes because I freaked out over a stove. The morning after, my dad texted my sister asking where I was. Not dumb at all. You could have died in an actual gas leak. Better safe than sorry. Don't be afraid to call for help. The police. A police officer. 1% actually stopping crime, 40% solving other people's problems, and the rest of it doing paperwork on the first 2. Police dispatcher here, and I would have to answer this with a simple 2/3 of the calls that come in are a waste of time, but we have to entertain them. I have 2 that come to mind. First was an older lady calling BC during the winter. The neighbor's snowplow driver was pushing the snow onto her lawn and she didn't want the extra snow on her grass. Second, and this happens kinda frequently, is for the black person walking down the street. And apparently this black person shouldn't be here. BC, they live in an upscale area and don't see these kind of people around here. And this is on top of all the domestics that are basically calling for a cop to come babysit them and make it right. Obligatory not a cop. My brother became a cop later in life. Before that he was a mechanic and owned his own small business in the town he lived in and later became a cop in. He sold his business once he became a cop, and during his first couple months on duty a call came in because someone's car had broken down on the side of the road. I bet you can guess where this is going. The dispatcher asked if they were hurt or in any danger. No, my car just broke down. Can you send officer, brother's last name, to come take a look at it? He's my mechanic. Technically it wasn't something he responded to. I don't think he was even on duty that day. But definitely don't call 911 to come take a look at your car. He got a lot of crap for it at work the next day. Not a cop, but I bet they thought a call my friends and I made was really stupid when it came in. When I was around 13 I was staying at my friend's house with 2 other people. One girl somehow got her hand stuck in the garbage disposal. We tried everything we could think of to get it out. Ice, hot water, cold water, oil, and a lot of other things. We were there alone, and this was before cell phones were popular, so we couldn't get a hold of any of our parents. After I think about 2 hours, we ran out of ideas and called the cops. They asked us a crap load of questions before finally sending out a cop. Cop showed up, realized it was legit, had no idea how to free her hand, and called for backup. 3 more cops and a fire truck later, her hand was freed. Not a cop but a retail manager. Had a customer call the cops because his appliances were on backorder and there was nothing I could do to make Samsung get them to us any faster. He had the cop come to the store to force me to do something. The cop was visibly bored and asked me what's going on and then said, well, he has obviously singed everything he can and all looks like you either need to wait or cancel the order. Customer waited another week or so until delivery. I choose to interpret that to mean the customer waited at the store for a week for his appliances. When I was 6 I was mad at my dad, so I locked myself in my room and called the police. Hung up the second I heard a voice on the other line, but they dispatched 2 officers anyway. They show up at the front door, much to my dad's confusion, come into my room and say something along the lines of, hi there, you okay? Did you call by accident? Have a good night. Then I ran and cried and said sorry to my dad cause I thought he was going to go to jail. So I imagine those cops were fairly bored with that giant waste of time. Or relieved you were okay. I got a flat, and someone called the police to check out the suspicious car that earned me a cop, fire truck and an ambulance while I was swapping out my flat. Obligatory not a cop, but when I was a kid, my mom called the cops because she heard popping sounds she thought were gunshots in our garage. She rushed my brother and I into the car, in the driveway, and waited for the cops. Turns out, she forgot a case of Diet 7-Up in our garage and the popping noises were the cans exploding. Not a cop, but had a woman call the police on me for not turning the air conditioner down at the restaurant I was working at. It was locked. I didn't have the key. Key holder was owner who was out of town. Called and said I was trying to assault her by heat. No freaking lie. Cops showed up, heard 30 seconds of her story, looked at me and told me to tell her to leave and never come back, and they would happily come back to enforce a ban if she ever tried to come back in. BTW, it was July in Arkansas, 101 degrees with 90% humidity, no air conditioner, my big sweaty butt. The heat in Arkansas is assault. It's assault that is worse than beating your grandma with a tire iron. I was a caller that time. My landlord owned the house next door, but it had been empty for over a year. One night I saw a light randomly bobbing around inside the house. No other lights were on. Nobody in the driveway. Knowing the house was empty, and knowing the landlord would use the room lights and not a flashlight, I called the cops. I was in an upscale neighborhood. They responded within 3-4 minutes. Turned out to be headlights hitting a window just enough to imitate someone with a flashlight. On a brighter note, the woman officer who responded was really hot. I feel so safe with you here, officer. Oops, my bathrobe. I'm going to leave now, sir. Not police, but I used to live in an extremely small town. Someone called to report a skunk in their yard. 3 fire trucks and an ambulance were dispatched. I'm serious. Also, my next door neighbor sold pot before it was legal in our state. He got into a huge screaming match with his girlfriend. I poked my head out to see what was going on and he was screaming for help and that he was bleeding. Naturally, I called 911, so he didn't bleed to death. The police arrived. He was not bleeding. Later, he admitted he was being a little bee because his girlfriend locked him out. And finally, my grandma's toilet broke and was making noise. She called 911 so they could check the house for intruders. Officer, the robbers sound suspiciously like running water, and they smell like crap. Not a cop, but our neighbors when I was a kid once called the police on us because we refused to be social with them. Like the police showed up at our house. They were invited in, sat down, offered drinks and given the very long list of offenses that led to the silent treatment. The list ranged from property damage and animal abuse to domestic and B&E. They agreed that we probably shouldn't speak to these people. Yes, we called and reported each of these incidents and they had been dealt with to the point that we had officers sitting on the street watching the house. Not a cop, but this reminds me of what happened at my friend's high school. It was a Chicago public school, so it wasn't that great for the most part, and there were many fights that broke out all the time. A bunch of students one day decided to pull a prank where they pretended a fight was going on. They played 2 soda cans in the middle of the hall and formed a huge circle around it and started screaming, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" The security guards came running, breaking their way through the thick wall of kids and found the 2 soda cans just sitting there on the ground. My dad used to tell a story about a lady who would call into dispatch fairly regularly, weekly or monthly, I forget which, complaining of monkeys overrunning her house. My dad would arrive. Of course there were no monkeys, the lady had some sort of mental issues, but she would point out where she saw them, and he would dutifully chase them from the house until she said he got them all. Well, one time, as a kid, one of our cats decided to go and stand on my mom's cell phone. She wound up calling 911, and my mom had to stand there and explain that our cat was the one that dialed and it was an honest mistake. No cops were sent. Not a cop, but heard a story from my friend who was one. Someone called for a flock of suspicious birds in their front yard. When he showed up, the birds were gone. I'm calling to report a murder of crows being loud. In fairness, as a chicken, I can attest that crows use very filthy language. Had a call about a snake in an old woman's yard. Get there and it ends up being a little baby squirrel in the leaves. I put it on a box and take it back to the barracks and named him Squirrelington Banks and gave it to another guy we worked with in the same zone. A lot of people know about this squirrel because he got brought to a bunch of nearby places, so I don't know if any one of them are on Reddit or not. Obligatory, not a cop, but I work at a bank and we had a guy call 911 from the lobby and report that he had been robbed because we had been served a garnishment on his accounts and we were not legally able to just give him the money back. Then we got to call the police and say, "Hey, I know you are getting a call about a robbery at our bank, but here is what is actually happening." Another dispatcher here. Lady wanted to report a burg, not in progress, claiming multiple items stolen from her home. It was 2 cans of Mountain Dew and a box of Cheez-Its. Every day I go to at least one stupid call. A few. Lady calls that her house had been broken into. It hadn't. Her Sky TV box had gone into standby mode and she thought someone had broken in and messed with it. Man called because his sister drank his last beer. Woman calls because she saw a black man walking past. I told her to call back only if he murders her. Man called because he had his big toe stuck in the bath tap. What I'm sure would qualify. I was at the store when my dog escaped, tried to play with the neighborhood kids, knocked one down, and when they tried to put her back in the house they set off my alarm. So the police got the alarm and a child bitten by a dog call at the same address at the same time. When I got back, the alarm company called me. I found 4 cop cars. All that fuss for a pup who wriggled under the fence. She was thrilled with all the excitement. I'm eternally grateful that the kid's mom saw her kid get knocked down and confirmed for the cops there was no biting. I'm certain that rated up there on the stupid meter for them. Time to pay the dog tax. You told a cute story about your dog, so now you have to post a picture of it. Bangladeshi guy working as a trash collector called us and started accusing his 2 co-workers of stealing all his crap from his locker. The awkward part was he couldn't speak English, so he had to get his co-workers, the ones he was accusing, to translate for him. So he said an iPhone. A Samsung Galaxy S something, an iPad and a wad of $500 was missing from his locker. When did he notice they were missing? Yesterday. When did he last see those items? 2 weeks ago. Was the lock broken? No, he doesn't keep his locker locked. How many people can access the locker room? Locker room is not locked at all. Anyone can walk in. What the frick? I mean, really? Anyway, we just stand there and listen to him burn probably the only bridges he has for about 30 minutes, as we try to tell him in the most inoffensive way possible that he's really just an idiot and we can't help him. Finally he gets frustrated and just sighs and says thank you officers and walks off. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.